Welcome to the Divine Advantage Podcast, where we rediscover ancient truths for a prosperous future. Experience inspirational stories from values-based and impact-driven business leaders and educational content to empower you to build businesses with a heavenly advantage and change the world. Here are your hosts, Skeldon and Brian Orme.
All right, welcome. Come on, we got Brian. We made it. We made it to this.
We made it. Good to see you, man.
Good seeing you. And we are super stoked for, podcast number 1. This is a amazing journey. You know, I had another podcast called Kingdom Passive Income and got an interview about 30 amazing kingdom leaders. And now have an amazing co-host to bring out some more gold and some leaders and bring content that I truly believe can help shape culture, help inspire people to build, do more, follow God's plan, and really just steward what God gives us. You know, He gives us gifts and talents. Will we use them? Will we multiply them? Will we, make the most of this life we have? So, Brian, do you want to get started, man? We have an amazing guest today. I'm super stoked.
Very excited. Episode 1. This is ground zero. So we're excited. Our first guest, his name is Chris Lee. He's the founder and chairman of Solgen Power. Solgen, which employs over 1,300 team members, was recently recognized by Financial Times as the 6th fastest growing privately held company in the nation. Bada bang. This was all accomplished in under 5.5 years of being in business. Recently closed on a private equity deal that valued Solgen in the 9-figure range, which was his second 9-figure exit in a very short period of time. Beyond his business accolades, Chris is first and foremost a family man. He and his wife, Andrea, have been married for 17 years and are raising 5 beautiful children on a 23-acre hobby farm in Washington State. Come on. Chris is a leader, successful entrepreneur, and a member of the Ford's Business Council. He bootstrapped his success in the solar industry before building an extensive real estate portfolio focused on multifamily and short-term rentals. He is the most passionate about helping others achieve success and fighting for the causes closest to his heart. That's awesome. That passion led Chris to launch the Founder Podcast, a top 30 business show, and one of the fastest growing podcasts in the world. Boom.
Come on, man. That's an amazing resume. I'm super stoked for you guys to hear more from Chris and be inspired. His story is really powerful. And just what is possible, as you just from overcoming adversities. Even I learned from diabetes and, overcoming how do you work with diabetes and still, fulfill your calling, being a sports guy, being an athlete and, a go-getter. And found out like a lot like me, like type D dominant personality, like God put us here to take dominion. But, sometimes we still got obstacles we have to overcome. And in life, you're going to have trials and tribulations. You're going to have things to overcome. And Chris is a great example of that. So you guys let us, and if you can also just make sure you guys subscribe to this podcast and on YouTube, it really helps us a lot. So awesome. Without further ado, welcome Chris Lee.
What's up, guys? Appreciate it. Good to see you. Good to be here. Good to be here.
And so holding it down in Washington, we got Washington, Texas, and California. We're holding down the America, USA.
Very good.
So Brian, how do you want to get started with Chris? He has such an amazing journey. I mean, from, overcoming all these things to building a 200 million plus revenue company. There's so many things to get into. What do you think, Brian, we should start with?
I think, when people read something like that or hear something, it's like, okay, this guy was handed a bunch of stuff. He's got this big inheritance and he just, kind of glided with ease into this world. But we know that's not true. What was kind of the journey, kind of maybe some catalytic moments that really shifted things for you?
Yeah, definitely wasn't handed anything. I came out of the womb, born to 2 incredible parents. So I think the advantage that I had was family in a God-centered life. Outside of that, financially, we weren't, richly blessed, but we always had everything that we needed. So my dad was a school teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, 7 kids, and they just did a fantastic job raising us with discipline and work ethic. And my mom came from a little bit more of a wealthy family. Her dad was a medical doctor. My dad kind of came from a little bit of a white trash background, divorced parents. His dad was a drunk, different things. And so my dad was kind of like the one that broke the chain of generational issues. And so, with my dad, he just taught us, just work hard. And for him, working hard meant going to college, being the first in his family to graduate from college and get a good job, a good steady job, and just raise a family right, and be a believer. And I'm forever grateful to my dad for just being that awesome example. And then my mom, like I said, she came from a little bit more of an affluent background, and the fact that they even were attracted to each other is quite interesting. But my mom taught me how to dream, taught me how to believe in big, and go and accomplish whatever I set my mind to. And so at an early age, I learned how to make money. Had my first job at the age of 9. It was a requirement in our household that by the age of 12 we had to provide for everything but underwear and food on the table. And so we figured out how to hustle. And most of the time back then, hustling was just trading dollars for hours because we didn't know anything else. And so as many jobs as we possibly can. I held anywhere from 2 to 3 jobs at a time growing up, running newspaper routes at 4:30 in the morning, to driving tractor, delivering oil, working at a pizza place, just kind of everything. And so that's really where I think is like the foundation of my whole business experience started, was just learning how to work. And then at the age of 18, I got my first sales job, and realized I had the gift of gab, and the gift of influence, and the gift of being able to help people see life from my angle. And so when I realized I no longer had to trade time for money, and that I could actually create value and get paid for that value, that was a pretty powerful lesson at the age of 18. And that was selling Cutco knives. It was my very first sales job.
Come
And
on, Cutco.
yeah,
So for people listening, sales was instrumental for me. It's like once I learned I can do well in sales, and I found out both of us had like very disc personality type D, and once I started mastering cold calling and sales, like I ended up doing software sales, cold calling, and I did freight brokering and did really well and did millions of revenue doing that. And I was like, man, like God has given you the ability, but I didn't like it at first. I hated sales. I like my bosses had to like make me smile and dial and do all the tricks, always be closing. So talk about, it was so good to get those reps in. Even in the Army, I spent time in the Army. I did a lot of things I didn't like to do. But talk about that for people, young entrepreneurs, how important it is to do the things you don't like to do, like sales or even knocking on doors.
yeah. Luckily, I really enjoyed sales from the beginning, but definitely the hard aspects. Like, rarely do you ever feel like being successful, right? Like the work that's required to be successful, very few ever feel like doing it. And frankly, it's having the discipline to push beyond that, do the things that you need to do when you need to do them, whether you feel like it or not. And that my early days of sales, I got involved. I sold Cutco. I was a missionary for my church for 2 years, knocking on doors, getting doors slammed in my face, preaching the gospel of Christ, where most people didn't want to hear about it. Right? They didn't want a young missionary knocking on their door, trying to tell them to repent or change their lives or teach them about Christ. Right? And so I developed a lot thick skin and just a firm belief in what I was doing, regardless of how other people perceived me. And that's probably like one of the biggest keys to success is doing things that you believe in, regardless of how other people perceive you, or whatever the world judges you. And as I've had success, I've had haters and people that love me, and like I let neither of them get to my head, right? Like and so that was a lesson early on, and then I knocked doors for several years. So I was going to college to become a doctor, and because in my mind, if I wanted to be wealthy, I had to be a doctor. That's what my grandpa was. He was wealthy. We weren't growing up. I wanted to make a lot of money, and I wanted to impact lives. And so I was going to school. I've been very goal oriented. Like age 12, I knew exactly what my life was going to look like for the next 80 years. And, I knew I was going to get married to somebody I love. I was going to have a great family. I was going to serve a mission for my church. I was going to be wealthy. I was going to be a doctor. I was going to help a lot of people. And so for me, it was just check boxes, put in the work, make it happen. And while I was going to school, I started working a door-to-door job where I would go and I'd sell products, home products, door-to-door during the summer. And, very first summer, I made $65,000 in 3 months. Second summer, I made $105,000 in 3 months. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool. This is pretty great. And then I quickly realized that, through the help of a professor that told me, you can save more lives owning a successful business than you ever can as a medical doctor. And that really impacted me and changed me to the point where I decided to change my career path and kind of go down. And so I stayed in the sales world for quite some time. I worked in the door-to-door industry for like a total of 12 years from the standpoint of managing door-to-door salespeople, working as an executive, starting my first business at the age of 24. Yeah, but for me, it was all very hustle work, which meant it wasn't very scalable. If I put in work, I made money, but if I didn't put in the work, I didn't. And so that's when I really started getting enthralled with the idea of building teams and building culture.
Yeah, that's a great segue, and I think that's something that a lot of the people, and that myself and many others that want to go in entrepreneurship, and they go in what's called solopreneurship. And 4 years ago, I got part of the ClickFunnels community as I was exiting my W-2 six-figure job. Like, I know there's more than a W-2. Even though I was earning six figures, I was miserable, and I wanted to build something that felt like you could build ROI and impact. And and you get in those worlds, ClickFunnels and all these like marketing, internet marketing, and it's like solopreneur, hire a VA from the Philippines, and it's just like it's so like, I don't know, it's hard to get past that point where you're managing. So talk about some things. Like, you guys are managing a company that's doing 228 million in revenue last year. Like, what were some things as you were scaling and growing, what were some things that you needed to do that really got you to that first maybe 10 million?
Yeah, most young entrepreneurs don't realize it, but the thing that gets them to that first 5 or 10 million, the hustler, right? The hustle, that the hustler has to die in order to really scale. And what I mean by that is, like, it can no longer be dependent on you to be successful. You have to figure out how to replicate yourself. And you replicate yourself through systems and processes and recruiting good talent and finding good management and being the dumbest person in the room, right? And attracting incredible people that know how to do incredible things that you don't know how to do, right? To filling in for all your weaknesses. Because, when you're a hustler and a salesperson, you start to believe your own lies that, man, I know how to do anything. I can, if you just give me some caffeine and, a computer, I can type it out or make it work or whatever else. When the reality is like, that's not how a business grows. A business grows by becoming specialized in the one thing that you impact the most, and then surrounding yourself with a bunch of other specialists that do their one thing incredibly well that you suck at. And so for me, it was all about studying who had done it the best, having mentors, paying for education, going and building, being a part of masterminds or hosting masterminds myself, spending as many dollars as I could to educate myself, figuring out how to build incredible cultures, how to attract incredible talent, how to set up proper payment structures and document processes and everything else. And so, that is really what scaled us far and beyond the hustle mentality.
I think something in your journey that's really stood out is the idea of resilience. You talk about, I'm going door to door missionary work, I'm getting rejected. People are probably giving you colorful words on their porch, get out of my face, right? And then you've got, sales where there's that dynamic as well, and then scaling a business. I find kind of this generation has a harder time with the idea of resilience. We're in a culture of comfort and convenience. Climate controlled environments. I do wellness retreats where we purposely put people in uncomfortable, like whether it's cold exposure in an uncomfortable situation, that they can learn to be okay. But what has kind of been that role with that discipline resilience piece that's helped you scale and really be sustainable?
Yeah, I think it's just an understanding of the principle that there's no such thing as no pain, right? Like you either choose pain now or pain later, and pain now yields real fruit later. Pain later yields fake fruit now, right? And so, like when I hit the snooze button at 5 a.m., the fake fruit that I get is like 15 more minutes of sleep. It makes me feel good, right? But it yields real pain later of being fat, undisciplined, everything else, right? That goes associated with it. Versus the pain now, just overcoming the quick hitter. That's just not even that long lasting. It's just in the moment, and nobody wants to experience it. And if I can choose that always, I experience incredible fruit, incredible results, incredible things later. And so for me, it's like always my whole career is like, how can I experience the quick pain now? Where can I put myself in uncomfortable positions? Where can I do the thing that nobody else is doing, and going after the higher barriers of entry, the higher whatever else, right? Like, how can I do the work that nobody else wants to, so that I can experience a completely different back end than everybody else does?
Good.
So do you think it's possible for, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. It's like not everyone can be an entrepreneur, like maybe some people, and just create solutions. But I think everyone can have an entrepreneur spirit and innovate within, like as an entrepreneur, like you needed a COO, you needed an integrator, you needed a director of operations.
Absolutely.
So you can innovate within Solgen or innovate within, Google or Twitter, and still be an entrepreneur minded, like, hey, Elon, what about this, and that? And like, let's think 3 years ahead and innovate and get promoted and still do things. But what are your thoughts on just the idea of, I don't know, like the idea of building long-term wealth if you are not like able to actually build equity and you're just kind of an entrepreneur?
Well, first of all, anybody can have equity. Equity doesn't have to be in a business that you started, right? So to your point, less than 1% of the population are true entrepreneurs. Like that know that will have the ability to build a business, scale a business, self-replicate, and be able to go and experience a 9-figure exit, 8-figure exit, even a 7-figure, right? Like very, very, very few of the population are ever going to be able to do that. But everybody has the ability to hustle, right? Everybody has the ability to have a side income, to be able to do things that are just a little more, and everybody has the ability to be an investor from a standpoint of owning real estate or owning cash producing assets. Like this is not limited to the less than 1% of the population, which are the entrepreneurs, right? Anyone can be, and also on top of that, to be an intrapreneur, as you brought up, like I can go and find somebody that's built from 0 to 1 and help them scale from 1 to 4, and I can negotiate a piece of the upside, right? And so without having to go take that initial risk of launching it out of my garage, bootstrapping it with my own money or whatnot. So like every single person has that given to them. Fact is most people don't take it because, one, they're not disciplined enough. They want to spend more than what they make. Okay. So that's the first thing you got to figure out is like, how do I live in a deficit? How do I invest more than I spend? Right. Like, and most people are unwilling to do that. So if you can figure that out, be disciplined. Now I have the ability to go and buy into an equity position. And as Tony Robbins says, if you do not have ownership or an investor or whatnot, an equity position in anything, whether that's real estate or whatnot, you are nothing but a dancing bear. And that dancing bear, it doesn't matter whether you're making $15 an hour as a minimum wage person or $1,000 an hour as as a surgeon or as a brain surgeon. Like, both of those people are dancing bear. Every single morning you have to get up and you have to dance in order to make it. And so in order to eliminate that, you have to put yourself in a position to be able to have equity. And equity is earned in one of two ways: blood, sweat, and tears, or with cash. And everybody has access to cash. Just most people aren't disciplined enough to have cash to be able to invest.
Man, come on.
Indeed.
It's a good, Jim. What are some skills you're seeing right now with, with what's happening with AI? In 2021, 2022, it's all about NFT technology, crypto, blockchain, which I think we'll see a lot more in blockchain solutions for, real estate, a lot of different things. But, there's all these new skill sets and new things. Even being a YouTuber and social media, you have Logan Paul has created, a $1 billion water brand. You have people like, Mr. Beast has a $100 million burger company, $100 million plus chocolate company. So this is inspiring young people to be like, oh, I just want to build a brand and a YouTube. So what are you seeing right now especially with God and like from heaven to this, the physical, the practical?
Right. So, what you're really talking about is mastering the art of influence. And the art of influence is something that God wants us all to master. And influence is simply helping other people see things from your point of view, right? And so you can influence one, you can influence your family, you can influence 1,000, you can have 1 million subscribers that you influence, whatever it is. Like, the power of influence is very imperative. And in order to influence, one, you got to have a belief system, right? A belief system that, like, I am sure of what I believe, and you have to take a stand for it. You can't be wishy-washy, right? You can't be like, oh, I think this. Oh, no, I don't think that. I think that, right? Like, and so if I have a core belief system that I stand up and I teach and I preach and I help other people gather, whether that's building a solar business, building a family, building a community, building a YouTube following, right? It's like, it's being willing to take a stand in what you believe and then constantly adding to that belief system through knowledge, right? Through study, through development, through prayer, through whatever it may be. And so I think that skill, the ability to believe in something and influence others to create a tribe that can get behind you, that is the most relevant, especially in the day and age like you referenced. AI, right? AI is taking care of a lot of like just the menial tasks. Like, if I can just boom, boom, boom. So, one, you got to be able to influence. Two, you got to be able to solve problems. You got to be able to take all the available tools that are out there, AI, people, sales, operations, SOPs, whatever, right? And you got to be able to figure out how do I solve this? And I actually heard something the other day which really stuck, and I absolutely loved it. Millionaires, when they're faced with a problem, they say, how can I solve this? Right. And so they start thinking through like all the different tools and everyone. Billionaires are a little bit different. Billionaires, instead of saying, how can I solve this, they say, who can solve this? Okay. And the difference is billionaires rely on their network. They understand that there are people out there that are much better at solving the problem. And so millionaires, they try solving it all themselves and having the answers for everything and having all the knowledge, all the tools, all the everything. Where billionaires is they've created a network of people that can solve issues. And so anytime that they're faced with a problem, they reach out to they're not too prideful. They don't just sit back on their own horse thinking I can just figure this out myself. They come to someone and say, hey, can you help me with this problem? I think you're pretty good at this. Is there any way? And that's where you begin to get the real massive influence. And you allow other children of God to shine in their greatness, right? Like that's the important in building a great business is having your talent and being the best at your talent and allowing everybody else to shine in their talents and being able to influence that.
It's good, man. There's a Greek word, metron, sphere of influence, and kind of as the layers of your influence has increased over time, what's kind of that look like in your relationship with God, protecting your values? Obviously you have a family, you have 5 children, because you're being stretched, right? And it's like, how do you protect yourself to scale in a way that is making sure your values stay intact?
Well, for me, it's just having an eternal perspective and knowing who I am, right? Like I know I'm a son of God, and I know that life exists beyond this earth, right? And with that knowledge, if that is the center of my belief system, when we talk about believing in something, then everything else, right? Anything that takes away from that, like I'm not gonna participate in it. And so, like the next appendage for me, being a child of God and believing in eternal life, is that my family is my next appendage, right? Like these are what God has given me to be able to experience what heaven will be like, is being around the people that I love, being around incredible people. And so like those are my first 2 important things. Everything else is simply something that I do to go out and create value and to be able to serve these two things, right? And so for me, it all is all like in a belief system. So like it's interesting. My wealth, I've created a lot of financial wealth, which is cool. It's awesome. You can do incredible things. I believe that finances are the ultimate magnifier of who a man or a woman is, right? Like that there's no such thing as like money being evil, right? Money is like the great multiplier. And so for me, like knowing, and I operate from this, my kids all know this, like everything I earn on this earth will be going to God when I die. My kids do not inherit $1, right? Like it's all going to my church when I die. But because that, and so when I knowing that, it's so much easier to operate from like a standpoint of like, I'm never going to question my values. I'm never going to question my morals. I'm never going to do this, that, and the other. In fact, I had an experience with my board where when I was the CEO, where there was like the question of like, hey, should we be open on Sundays? And I told him, like, no, like this is not a question for me. And there's no amount of finances that will ever make it worth it to me, especially knowing that like my finances are dedicated to God. Why on earth would I slap God with this? I hold the 10 commandments very important, that we should, the Sabbath is meant to be kept holy and not for me to work. It's for me to rest. It's for me to spend time with my family to serve God. And so, like that was a moral dilemma that I was put up in, but it was never a question. It was just like, no, I will step down. I will leave. I will do like if this is a decision that I have to make, I cannot run a company in which it doesn't align with my morals. And so, yeah, for me, like that's it. And that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but just having that, everything else just falls into place.
That's amazing.
No, it's great.
Does what are some things we've been studying wealth too, and I think the Western culture church has really made like this, I don't know, I mean, even on the spectrum of, there's some prosperity where it's just like, hey, I'll give a prophecy or I'll give an abundance message, so sow into me and you'll be a millionaire. So there has been some manipulation, but at the same time, I think the devil has tried to keep so much of like the most respected people I respect in the Christian faith are poor or don't understand money or like kind of broke, and they could do so much if they had wealth, but they just have no like grid for it because they just like whatever, for whatever reason. So I feel like there really has been this like Satan has tried to keep Christians poor and Christians not be able to influence culture, not be able to influence Hollywood movies, Like our movies are low budget because we don't even have the money to make good movies, but we could because we have the most creative. I talk to Christian people in Hollywood and stuff, and we have the talent. We just have never came together like the big global bankers or the global Hollywood and been like, hey, let's fund really good films. What we do have the talent. So in saying that, what are some things, or first talking about just what do you think about the kingdom of heaven, and even people, I'm starting to meet more people that are kind of like crushing it in the world like you are, and they're starting to come together and say, hey, we can actually do more together and build more together and start funding cool projects together. So like the idea of that, and then would love to go into some of the even impact things like, fighting, what we've seen with Sound of Freedom and, human sex trafficking and the things we can do by even just voting with our feet, voting with our money, but also coming together and solving these problems.
Yeah, I think this whole just misunderstanding of like I got to be poor to be spiritual is such just it's a crock, right? Like it's easier to be poor and spiritual. I will say that much, right? Because like when you're broke and humble, you have nowhere else to turn but to God, right? Like, and so I think that's the common that's a common misconception. And on the flip side, when you're rich, right, it's easy to say, I did this, right? Like this is because of me. And so I think that's where like the misconception that you're talking about comes from. But the truth of the matter is those that are broke and spiritual and aren't taking advantage of the talents that God gave them to go and be prosperous and go into influence, those guys, they are not living the gospel of Jesus Christ, and vice versa, right? Like so I firmly believe that God put us here on this earth to go and influence and to experience life, not just so there in my the way I always break it down is there's 4 areas of life: association, spirituality, economic, and physique. And if a principle is real and a principle is true, it applies to all 4 areas of life, right? And so and once you understand that, it's all intertwined, because how you do anything is how you do everything. Like I cannot be a 400-pound spiritual man, right? I can't, because that would be me living 2 completely different lives, right? Like I'm disciplined in trying to worship God, but some reason I have no discipline at the dinner table or waking up early and putting in the workouts and everything else. Or same thing at work, right? I claim to be this great producer of value in my spiritual life, but yet I'm just putting in a half days of work and not giving it my all, and not being an incredible influencer or whatnot of my relationships, of my financial prosperity. And so I firmly believe that, like, as a spiritual man of God, that I have a duty and an obligation to be an example of fitness. I believe that I have an obligation to be an example of relationships. I believe that I have an obligation to be an example of financial prosperity, because once again, all these things are connected and they're all governed by the same exact principles. Like, and so I can never stand before my maker and be like, yeah, hey, I worshiped you great, but I just half butted it at work all day, or I just didn't hit my full potential. And so, yeah, that's where I come from when it comes to like I am not fulfilling my total potential unless I am the best version of Chris Lee. And now the interesting thing is, the best version of Chris Lee is not the best version of Brian Orme or the best version of Eric Skeldon, right? Like we're different. We have different talents. We have a different background, different way that we were raised. My obligation is what I know to be true based off of my principles, my core values, everything that I have been taught. It is up to me to be better than Chris Lee, not better than anybody else in the world. And so if I do not return to my maker as the best version of myself, I failed God. I failed my Savior Jesus Christ.
Powerful.
Showing up. Come on, so God can show off.
So, Chris, what are some
Love it.
things as you've built these amazing companies, and like you said, you've had some amazing exits with a couple of different businesses. How have you been able to like give back? What are some things you're passionate about, and like just that are impact? Like, hey, I like solving this problem, and actually having resources I can actually help more people.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I'm really passionate about. You brought up a couple of them. One is human trafficking. I think like one of the like most horrendous evils in today's world is that, right? Like literally abusing the our children and the physical body, right? All the sins of men, right? Like I think that is just one of the greatest evils that we face today, and the root of that is like is the unrighteousness of like the destruction of the family, right? And just the fact that mothers and fathers don't stick together and teach core principles that are centered in Christ. The removal of God from our schools, the removal God from our communities, from our daily activities, right? And so that's something I'm very passionate about. On my podcast, the Founder Podcast, I actually I had Tim Ballard. He's the one that the Sound of Freedom is all based off of. He was a guest on my podcast, and so I'm pushing to help run his fund. So he runs a fund called the Spear Fund, and so he used to run a nonprofit called OUR, Operation Underground Railroad. But then he realized that if he went and he created a fund, he could allocate funds better to organizations that are going to best use those funds. Because what he saw happening at OUR is they were inundated with funds and they had no way to deploy all the cash and actually to save these children. They were saving, but they just weren't saving enough. And he wanted to take some of the funds and give it to other groups, and they didn't want to. And so he's like, man, this is just like anti-capitalistic. And so what he decided to do is start the Spear Fund, in which he could go and see these different human trafficking rescue programs that are happening, and saying, okay, who has their basic necessities covered, and that these dollars are actually going to go to saving a life, going to saving a child, getting these terrible people put away in prison and everything else. And so he recently launched that, and it's something I'm really passionate about. In fact, if you want to donate to it, I'd highly recommend you can donate $5, $10. It's just go to the Spear Fund. I believe it's thespearfund.org/the Founder Podcast. That's my link. I don't make any money off it. It's just to track how much dollars are coming through my influence or whatnot. But yeah, it's something that I'm extremely passionate about. The other thing is the education system. I think the core of society is the way that kids are being educated. One, in the home, like I talked about, the core value of the family, and two is where they go and they spend 6 to 8 hours a day, in these public school districts and everything else. And so, I'm very passionate about changing policy regulation around that. In fact, I'm going to be launching here in the next few years. I've been working on this project for a long time, a way to actually revamp secondary education after high school and prepping people for the rest of their careers. But yeah, those are two things that I'm extremely passionate about. Also, on top of that, I donate to the needy and to my church and do different things that directly impact right in my local society and ways to serve and that type of thing. So
It's awesome, man. Thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. And it's just really cool to see, Tim Ballard and just the success of that film and how like it was held up for like 5 years and like all the rights that they have to get that film back and like get it to, and then it just Angel Studios just blew it up. And what is your thoughts on Hollywood and just some of the innovative stuff Angel Studios is doing? I think there's just a whole shakeup that's going to happen. A lot more Kingdom Media gonna happen.
yeah, man, I sure hope so. It's been great to see the success to that film because you're right. Like there's an evil that's trying to keep the stuff from coming forth, And yeah, Hollywood, man, it is crazy. In fact, I was listening to a podcast the other day talking about a DreamWorks creator, one of the creatives at DreamWorks, and where he was sitting in these board meetings back in 2013 and 2014, where it was made known to them that all these creatives were being used as pawns in the game to push evil messaging. And it was like, it was such like, to the point where he talks about this podcast. He's like, the gay guy was up and yelling at him. He couldn't believe that he was a part of this. And like, it was just like all your non-traditional Christian people were like, what? We're being used as pawns in this. And it was crazy. They were, so get this, and I can share with you the podcast. I can share a link with you afterwards. But like, literally, they were taking words from like different manifestos regarding like the family that came from my church and came from the Catholic Church, and different things that are like trying to push good, righteous messaging. And they were putting those words into the villains' mouths of these cartoons to make them seem senile and crazy, so that when a kid programs and hears these words over and over, and then they see it in religious text or whatever else, they associate it with evil. It's crazy. And like, and like, that is what is happening in Hollywood. And it's like so very imperative. It's crazy. Like, 10 years ago, you would have thought that was nuts. But since COVID, like, nothing surprises anybody anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. The conspiracy
That's
theorists
true.
are now just like, hey, I'm just I'm the prophet. I just saw this 3 years, 5 years ahead of time.
Right. It's crazy.
So
But yeah,
last
but it is a sad day that we're in, and an evil that we have to face and fight. And I applaud Angel Studios and everybody else and the people that are funding this, because we do need good messaging. We need to take back our country and recenter it in God.
Come on. And so
Indeed.
last thoughts for people who are out there, as we're coming into, potential recession or different, things where the world would say it's chaotic coming into political season, all the crazy stuff that happens in the media. How, what is your encouragement and hope? Obviously we have God, we have a divine advantage. We have, access to all of heaven. Jesus has given us authority. We're sons, of the Most High. So what is your encouragement? And I love what a mentor, Dr. Miles Monroe, teaches, is like how in times of where it's called like chaos, or in times of crisis, there's actually opportunity. And so I really believe in the next few years there's going to be so much opportunity for believers as they partner with God, as they partner with God's people who are, like you said, be the dumbest person in the room. Like, get around people like Chris, get around people like Brian Orme, and through just divine intelligence, me asking questions, you're going to start growing. You're going to start believing bigger, start thinking bigger, start saying, I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to learn how to make more money. I'm going to get better skills. And I believe this is a time period where there's going to be a lot of transfer. And I believe there's a great wealth transfer, but it's not going to come from us sitting on the couch. It's going to come from us solving a problem, from us partnering with things that bring those downloads or things going back to us because we partnered with the right things. So what are your final, hope of encouragement for the listeners today?
Yeah, I mean, there's opportunity everywhere. It's easy to be successful in an up economy, and requires a professional in a down economy. And so, it's about getting your house right, and that's, being spiritually prepared, mentally prepared, getting all the education you can, investing in yourself, and ultimately, I love what Urban Meyer teaches. Urban Meyer teaches an equation called E plus R equals O, and what that stands for is event plus response equals outcome. And we can always get the outcome we want as long as we control the response. Events come and go, and these are things that we have zero control over. And so whether it's a good event, whether it's a bad event, whether it's a down economy, whether it's like I got hit with $1 million fine or whatever it is, ultimately it's how do I respond to that? And the thing that I love, and I shared this with one of my employees, he was talking about like all these terrible events he was going through. Like his wife had cancer and this, that, and the other. And he's like, how do I maintain my faith in God during this time? Like when just things are so tough. And I'm like, God is not found in the events. God is found in the response, right? And ultimately, Christ, what he did on the cross, what he did in the Garden of Gethsemane, suffering and giving us power to overcome, to repent, to change, is what gives us the power to respond regardless of the event. And so when we understand that and we control the response, we understand that we are the masters of our own destiny, that with Christ, we can go and control whatever outcome we desire. Like that's when life becomes powerful and you can go do incredible things.
Come on, man. That's great.
Come on, Brian, any encouragement or things you see for Chris and the future of, Chris and just all that he's done and good.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious you have a heart for God, a heart for family, the things that really matter. And, I was on a walk a few months ago and God asked me this question. He says, Brian, why do you think in cities that have a lot of churches, the city's not really changing? What do you think the issue is? So I'm coming up with what I think are good answers. And he's like, no. And so what is it? He says, they don't know how to multiply money, my body. And there's just something about the ability, parable of the talents, right? The guy multiplies money, has influence over cities, 10 cities. And I'm seeing that in our conversation. The measure of your influence is going to exceed what you are even anticipating and dreaming about. God's just going to position you in places of influence to be an influencer of the influencers. And it's just something he's designed you to be.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's interesting. I actually have the parable of the talents pulled up. I shot a podcast about it yesterday, and it's interesting that in verse 21. So it's in Matthew chapter 25. It talks about like that the multiplication, like the goal of life is to experience joy, right? And the multiplication of our talents, it talks about, it says, enter into the joy of the Lord. Like that's how we experience the joy of the Lord, is the experience. And the opposite, the man that had one talent and did not multiply it and did not, right? In verse 28, in verse 25, he says he was afraid, right? Like fear governs those people. And so like, do I want to be fearful or do I want to be joyful? And in order to be joyful, I have to go out and multiply and share with others my talents. And I have to operate in a position where I'm creating a consumption deficit, where I'm sharing more than what I'm consuming.
Come on.
Wow, multiplication. Well, thank you guys. And hopefully all the listeners are going to receive some multiplication today. Check out the Founders Podcast. Chris, where can people check out the Founders Podcast and some of your other stuff online? You post amazing content to help out people.
Yeah, so it's actually singular. It's the Founder Podcast. You can find that on all major platforms. I think Apple, as of this morning, was ranked like number 22 of all business podcasts. You can also follow me on Instagram at Chris Lee QB, like quarterback. That's on all major platforms: TikTok, Instagram, whatever it may be. So appreciate it.
Awesome. And what kind of content are you? Can people be looking forward to that you're going to be producing on there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's everything. It's all about all four areas of life: association, spirituality, economic, and physique. I interview a lot of incredible founders, people that are doing incredible things throughout the world. Share a lot of my own insights, family. I just try to be a really authentic person. Like, some people's Instagram accounts is like only one thing. Like I throw out all kinds of crap. Political season, I'm probably going to be on there talking politics. Sports season, I'm going to be talking about my Seahawks. It all kinds of good stuff. So,
all right, make sure you guys get on there. Thank you, Chris. We will see you guys on the next one.
Appreciate it.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.